Hello everybody, I'm Nick, and in this video you're going to see an uncut 1-hour discussion between me and Dan Roth, the principal program manager for Blazor, who saw my previous video on my worries about Blazor and wanted to have a chat about it to clear some things out. Now, I asked some really hard questions and I got some really interesting answers like this one.
React definitely is sort of my natural inclination to go.
So if you're interested in Blazor and its future, you don't want to miss out on that. Now, on Dome Train, we just actually released the deep dive on Blazor course. We're preparing for a very long time, a follow-up to the Getting Started course. So how appropriate to give the first 200 of you a 20% discount code on that and the Getting Started course by clicking the link in the description down below or using the discount code launch20 at checkout. Now just enjoy this chat. So yeah, Dan, welcome to this video. Obviously, you saw the video I made a while ago about Blazor and the criticisms, and you said, let's talk about it. So I'm very happy to have you here. First, in case anyone lives under a rock and they don't know who you are, who are you and what are you doing?
Nick, it's great to be here. First of all, it's a pleasure. I'm Daniel Roth. I'm the principal product manager for ASP.NET Core and Blazor on the .NET team. So I work on our primarily on our web UI stack. So anything that produces HTML, like draws user interfaces in a browser, I work specifically on those areas. I also help manage the broader ASP.NET Core vision and direction.
I see. So first and foremost, congratulations on the .NET 9 release. Like it's out finally every year, like clockwork in November. Do you, on that point, and I wasn't originally planning to ask this question, but I tend to ask it to anyone working at Microsoft, whether that's C#, .NET, or any product. We've seen, cancellations on features in C# and maybe something in .NET is being pushed later. Do you feel in any way restricted to hit that deadline? And do you think it's a good thing to have it or a bad thing to have it?
I mean, it is a deadline. So yeah, you're absolutely time bound on each release. So it's definitely a restriction. I mean, that's kind of the game of engineering and shipping software is there are dates and there are resource constraints, and so you got to do what you can with what you have. So yeah, I think the year cadence is long enough that we can still do very significant things, and we deliver large meaty features in those time frames. It does create this with a date-driven release. There is always this problem of things that need to go longer. Like if you want to have an effort that expands multiple releases, getting into that mindset I think can be a little bit harder because everyone's sort of thinking in 1 year chunks, like what can we do in a year? But we do those things as well. I think the runtime team in particular and the C# team have many long lead efforts that they're working on and that will carry over multiple years. So I think it's a good cadence. It's long enough that you can do big things. It's short enough that we have, a regular cadence of features, and it's an interesting dial, right? I know some people sometimes feel overwhelmed with how much features we ship on that yearly cadence and wish we went even a little slower than that. But at the same time, you get a nice, it's a platform, so you get this float of value every year that you just accrue by building on .NET, whether that's performance or language features or new APIs. So I think it's pretty close to the right balance. We get feedback occasionally about adjusting it, but I think it's not too far off, at least, of what would be optimal.
Can you say anything to people saying that I'm not going to use .NET 9 because it's an STS release and we only should use LTS because that's the stable version and STS is the unstable preview version of .NET? Because I see it all the time.
I feel like we should make T-shirts like the LTS team or the STS team. That's right. I mean, they both exist for a reason, right? We have them both because we know that our customers and users that need those different time frames. I mean, I would definitely favor stay on the latest if you can. Like if you can get the latest greatest features and performance improvements and all that value, then you should. The level of agility you need to have is to be able to update your apps to the latest .NET platform about once a year. Now, there are definitely customers that I talk to that just don't have that agility available to them. And it's not because they don't necessarily want to, it's just because of either processes or environments that they deal with that are just hard for them to roll out releases at that cadence. I know I've talked to big customers that like have this approval process to get a new technology, and it has to be on a list that their architect group has signed off on. And every time a new .NET platform version comes out, they have to go through that process, and that can take longer than the moving on to the latest STS would allow them to do. But if you can move on to the latest, I absolutely would. We care deeply about backwards compatibility. Gone are the days of like .NET Core 1, 2, and 3 where things were like breaking with every release. Like the idea is you should be able to update your TFM to the latest .NET version, update your packages, and that should be it. If it's not it, then that's probably an unintended regression that you should let us know about, and we will try to get that addressed in a patch release. So, as we can. If you have the organizational agility to do it, you absolutely should, would be my recommendation. But we understand that some people need that longer support cycle or that slower cadence so they can manage the releases. And we get that. That's totally fine. You shouldn't feel bad if you're on the team LTS.
But there is no difference in quality and like between STS and LTS. I see it a lot.
There's absolutely no difference in quality. It is kind of interesting, right? Like you would think that there would be some adjustment maybe in the like types of things that we do in each release, that like LTS releases were kind of like polish up the features that we introduced in an STS releases because you're going to support that longer. You're going to support for 3 years. The reality is, at least from what I've seen at Microsoft, that's definitely not the case. Like we shove as much value into each release as we can possibly get away with, because that year cadence comes around, and that's your opportunity to have impact, to help your customers, to deliver value. So yeah, there's not even really a difference in scope. Like we every year we think and talk about what can we do that would be the most impactful thing for our users to help them. Also for us, like most of Microsoft's backends is all built on .NET, so we're the platform for our company. We need to deliver value to those partner teams as well. Bing and Exchange and Dynamics, all these big systems. So there's a lot of pressure to deliver value each release, and that's how it ends up being.
Yeah, it's funny you mentioned Bing because I was talking to some engineers. That's not NDA. I'm just talking to myself now. And they were mentioning how Bing, when first, ChatGPT and all that Bing search and everything came out, the AI-driven stuff, they were in like .NET 7 Preview 3. They were using preview versions before the GA was out because they really wanted like to get the most out of the version. So if Bing can do it, you guys can do it.
Really tight collaborations with a lot of our internal partner teams to all the way up and down the stack, like the low-level runtime, the ASP.NET Core team, dealing with these huge services, like services that serve like billions of requests per day, tuning the stack, adjusting things to meet their needs. And I mean, the results of that work, I feel like, is definitely not NDA. Like you can just go onto the .NET blog and search for these user stories, the ones that are based on Microsoft teams, and there's tons of them of like, hey, we just saved like a gajillion cores by moving to .NET 6, 7, 8 or whatever version it was, because of that tight cooperation, and that then accrues value hopefully to the rest of the ecosystem. You get all the benefits of running your app on the same platform that all these huge services are running on.
Okay, so let's move into some Blazor questions because we want to answer what people are asking, and obviously you've seen my video. I've mentioned some criticisms, so enough with the icebreaker stuff.
And I gotta say that the criticisms we really appreciate. Like I don't think you've been alone. Like there've been several videos that have come out on YouTube, people saying, what do you think about Blazor, what its future? And I actually was really looking forward to have the opportunity to chat about common concerns. Like some of these questions are, I think, concerns that a lot of people have.
Yeah, like back in the day when I made that first video, like 4 years ago, the backlash for a small channel at the time was insane. And I'm like, people were like, "Oh, you took it down because you're like an MVP." I'm like, no, I took it down because at the time I just couldn't take the all of my videos were 99%. 99% ratio. and now I had like negative comments for the first time. God forbid we criticize something or Microsoft did. So, but I think we only grow if we criticize things. So last year, Blazor in .NET Conf had like an entire video dedicated to it, like 55 minutes long. This year, it was part of the ASP.NET Core 9 and Blazor conversation, but it only took 17 minutes of the entire thing. So
The keynote, like
of the no, not the
the keynote.
keynote, just the long video that you did later, separate to the
Oh, okay, yeah,
keynote.
of the ASP.NET Core overview. Yeah, yeah.
Is there, and actually Maui stuff were a bit more this year, but what do you think about that, and why was there less, objectively less chat about Blazor? Because even if you count how many times it was mentioned, I think it was 33 last year and 4 or 7 this year.
Well, I think it's no secret that the scope of what we did in Blazor for .NET 8 was very large. In fact, it was kind of bursting at the seams. Like we did this effort to take Blazor from being what was, intended to be a .NET option for client-side web development. So instead of having to write as an alternative to writing JavaScript, you can now build your apps, the client-side logic in Blazor, Blazor Server, Blazor WebAssembly. In .NET 8, we expanded that and stretched it to be a full stack web UI framework. Like we added static server-side rendering support, so you can just do the same patterns that we've done for decades.
Yeah.
With ASP.NET to send a request and render some HTML, you can now do that with just Blazor components. And then enabling you to take all the different render modes, the Blazor server pattern, the Blazor WebAssembly pattern, and mix them in one consistent Blazor web app. That was a lot of work, and it was a big moment for Blazor. So there was a lot of attention that was drawn to that in that particular release. In .NET 9, I mean that .NET 8 release was so heavy that there was even some carryover. Like there were, I think, a fair number of patches that came out afterwards to fix things up, and we knew that was actually intentional. Like we had to surface that up our management trainings. We're probably gonna have to there's a lot to stuff into this release. We're probably going to have to keep working on this stuff into the early .NET 9 cycle, which will eat into .NET 9 time, and then even in .NET 9, we'll probably focus on quality and fundamentals of that new pattern of the Blazor web app full stack web UI patterns. So .NET 9 for Blazor was more focused on those quality issues, addressing gaps in what we had just shipped. So in terms of messaging, it wasn't like there was a ton that was new. It was more just like, let's make what we just shipped better and more polished. So that's one reason why there's less Blazor content in .NET Conf, is because, well, mostly the feature set we did was, there were still new features, but it wasn't as transformative as what we were trying to do in .NET 8. And I think a lot of people appreciated that. They're like, oh, thank you, like a breath of fresh air. I just had to finally got my Blazor server app changed into a Blazor web app, and that took some work. And there's nothing hugely disruptive that happened in .NET 9 that I have to adjust to. I mean, technically, you didn't have to even do that adjustment. We still support the old Blazor server and Blazor WebAssembly patterns as is. Because back in pat. The other reasons, I think, also are the competing messages that you're dealing with. Like, obviously, Microsoft is all in on AI right now.
Yeah.
So that's kind of the mandate, is like, let's do AI. So they'll have huge messages around Copilot and how do you take .NET, how do you take your Blazor app and actually build intelligent apps with it? How do I use the OpenAI services to add these really cool functionalities to your application? So I know. I think it was Tim Anderson, right, that did a video recently also about the .NET Conf and his take
I
on
think
it.
that's
And
Ed Anderson.
is that? Oh, sorry,
You
my
mixed
bad, my
you
bad,
mixed
Ed.
Tim Corey and Ed Anderson, but yeah.
Oh, my bad. Yes, Ed. Sorry, Ed. I know he one of the things he talked about was like what Steve Sanderson presented in his session was he was showing AI features. I mean everything that Steve showed was in a Blazor app. Like he was building a Blazor application but using the AI features. So it was still Blazor, and actually Blazor interweaved throughout .NET Conf. The demo apps that you saw, like eShop, is Blazor. It just was more of the obvious technological framework choice for the UI layer that you're using while you're trying to demo these other features. So yeah, it was a more scoped release for Blazor, and the messaging then adjusted accordingly. The other big message at .NET Conf, of course, was Aspire, which is a whole another interesting topic in and of itself. I kind of wish. I tried to do this in my session to try and help people understand that Aspire really is just awesome tooling for anyone doing ASP.NET Core. I think we did a lot of Aspire messaging, and I think it almost makes it feel like it's a separate thing, like almost like a separate product, separate framework that you have to migrate to. But actually, one thing I love about Aspire is how it adds all this functionality, dev experience, the dashboard, the how easy it is to get your whole app up and running, handle the service discovery. These are all Blazor and ASP.NET Core concerns that I hope that every ASP.NET Core developer is looking at taking advantage of, because it is really, really nice. So that was the other big message, was Aspire and building production ready, cloud ready applications along with AI. Blazor was more of an incremental release for us in that sense. I mean, Blazor's now been around for 5 years. Like, we shipped Blazor for the first time in 2019. So it's been a while. It's a mature framework at this point. There's still lots we plan to do with Blazor, but it wasn't the main headline message at this .NET Conf, and that was very intentional.
Yeah, I understand. So I have a few questions here I want to ask. I'm going to start with the one that you're probably not going to answer, and I understand if you don't, but I'm going to ask it anyway. We know, at least I know, that Microsoft is tracking usage of different products. If I ask a PM under NDA, the right PM under NDA and under a few drinks, what's the percentage of like F# developers or VB developers, I'm going to get an answer. What's the percentage that you see of everyone using .NET using Blazor? If you can answer that, and I understand if you can't.
So we have. I'll do my best to. We generally don't. So the official policy is we generally don't share adoption numbers other than like the broad .NET adoption numbers. Blazor is used by several 100,000 monthly users. So that kind of can wave around ballpark about what you're looking at. For all of ASP.NET Core, we're looking at. I have to go check. It's over a million plus.
Yeah.
I don't remember if we were in the 2 million range, and this is monthly. Like, people use it every single month.
And that includes like API, web stuff, and everything, not just web stuff.
The whole ASP.NET Core stack. Anyone who's using like our web SDK, they might be doing MVC, they might be doing SignalR, they might be using gRPC. That's the whole ASP.NET Core framework usage. So that's about where we're looking at. The year-over-year growth of Blazor is very high, double digits percentages in terms of how many people using Blazor every year. So we're very happy with its growth rate. That's about what we're looking at with Blazor growth. So it's an important part of the stack. It is newer than like other like MVC. Like, we still have quite a lot of MVC users. There are more MVC users than Blazor users. I'm pretty sure there's even more web form users than Blazor users. Like, one of the interesting things about .NET, right, is we ship a technology, and I know people get really upset if something actually does get obsoleted and dropped. But the reality is, at least I think, we do that very rarely. Like, we have all these fairly old, very mature .NET technologies that we continue to support, and we have lots of people that still use them. And I know they get very nervous if anyone, if there's any signal, anything at all that suggests that maybe the technology they're working on might go away. Is this new thing going to replace the thing I'm currently using? And the answer almost always is no. We're going to continue to support that. Like, that's still there. We know you're using those technologies, and we'll continue to support you on them. Blazor is the newest web UI offering and the most flexible and we think the most productive one that we've shipped so far for .NET users. But all the other ones that we have, they're still there, and people use them, and we support you, and you get the various benefits of the .NET platform improvements as well. You get the new C# features, you get the performance improvements, you get access to all the new APIs. So that's about what we're looking at right now for Blazor adoption.
Yeah, two things on that. The last one, which I haven't thought about, is many people tend to want to use technologies that other people are using already. That there's a big enough community. I like to play a lot of games. I mostly play multiplayer online games. You don't want to play a game that nobody else is playing, because you just feel like, what is my achievement like compared to nobody? Because if you're the only, you're the best and the worst at the same time. So I understand the whole numbers thing. The other thing is, many people compare Blazor and a fear that it's going to go towards the Silverlight direction. Which, without Silverlight, we wouldn't have .NET Core. People don't understand it. And without Thai, we wouldn't have Aspire. So sometimes something has to die for something else to be born, because it just makes more sense. But Microsoft in general is not Google when it comes to killing products. I think, you mentioned web forms. I started with web forms back in 2015. And I'll be honest,
People
like
did.
looking back almost 10 years later, Webforce in many ways was ahead of its time, because we see this. If you take a look at the web ecosystem, we see this idea come back and back and back, and people say, "Oh wow, Next.js or whatever invented these new things." Like we had it. It was a bit, view state and all that, but we kind of had it already, and it keeps coming back. So, what do you think about Microsoft will just kill Blazor or Silverlight 2.0 and all that?
Yeah, I think I've given up about there ever being a time when I no longer get to ask the Silverlight question. It's the gift that just will always keep giving.
Yeah.
Our Silverlight. All right, like I said, Blazor's already been around for 5 years. I don't remember actually how long Silverlight's full lifespan was, but if you're still wondering if Blazor's going to stop being developed after it's been being developed for 5 years, like that's already a fairly old, as far as frameworks go, it's been around for a while. So no, we have no plans to stop investing in Blazor. In fact, it is our primary and recommended web UI solution when building on .NET, and that's how we invest in it. And it's the fastest growing part of our web UI framework. So we will continue to push on that. The support cycles, like if you're really worried about support cycles, like always remember that Blazor is part of ASP.NET Core. Like it's as much a part of ASP.NET Core as MVC or minimal APIs or SignalR is. It literally ships in the shared framework alongside those other technologies, which in turn ships with the .NET platform. So Blazor's support cycle is the same as .NET. It's part of the .NET platform. With .NET 8, you get a 3-year support cycle, so that goes through, what was it, like the 2026, I think is when that one ends. And then .NET 9 just shipped, so that will take you through mid-2025. We are working on our plans for .NET 10. There will, of course, be new Blazor improvements in .NET 10, and that will take you through 2028, right? So I think 2025 is when .NET 10 will ship, and then it'll be another 3 years after that. So you have years more of Blazor coming, already committed, and I expect many more after that. So support, it's with us this day. We do use it. We have customers that are very important customers that are using it. It's integrated into various other technology offerings as well. Like we use it in Aspire. The Aspire dashboard is built with Blazor, which then is now also being hosted as part of like Azure Container Apps, as providing a dashboard experience on Azure. If you're building Microsoft Teams apps, the Teams toolkit for the .NET one is based on Blazor and uses the Blazor model for building Teams apps. So it's pretty integrated into what we do. So I think if there's one concern or one worry that people have is like, oh, is Blazor going to go away? There's no plan, no world where that happens. There's no Silverlight moment for Blazor in any known future. It's kind of funny actually with Silverlight that in some sense, Blazor. I mean, I know people talk about Silverlight because Blazor kind of looks like it a little bit, right? Like it's like, oh, it's .NET kind of in a browser. Silverlight was .NET in a browser that's similar, and Silverlight died. Remember the technology differences there, though. Like Silverlight was a proprietary plugin into browsers that enabled all that to happen. There were industry motions that made that no longer really tenable. Like you weren't going to be doing that on a phone, like an iPhone anytime soon. So that was kind of a dead-end approach. Blazor's based completely on open web standards. So it's effectively just a web app using fancy web platform tech like WebAssembly and WebSockets and those types of things, but all standardized tech. So you're betting really on the longevity of the web platform in that regard. And ironically, in some sense, Blazor was the thing that resurrected Silverlight. Like there's an open source project called OpenSilver, which is a Silverlight port onto the same runtime that we use for Blazor, the .NET WebAssembly runtime, that gives you a Silverlight experience in using that same technology stack. So if you're a big Silverlight fan, you could go check out the OpenSilver project and still get your Silverlight app working on top of that standardized web stack. So Blazor has a long and bright future ahead of it. Is what we believe.
You had it here and a billion other places. The thing you mentioned about,
I'm sure people will still ask, and that's fine. That's
The other thing you mentioned, and again, I didn't have a question for this, but since you mentioned it, you mentioned support cycles and the fact that Blazor is part of that 18 month to 36. My math is no mathing. 36-month support period. Aspire, I don't think people understand. Aspire is not part of that. Aspire support ends the moment a new minor version is released of the. So if .NET 9.1 Aspire thing is released, the old one is out of support immediately.
Aspire is an out of band release from the rest of the .NET platform. So Aspire doesn't actually ship directly, excuse me, in .NET. So yeah, it doesn't get subsumed by that broader support policy. Actually, I'm glad you know the details of the exact Aspire support policy, because I didn't actually know them off the top of my head. But they're kind of in the mode right now of they're moving fast, like they're trying to deliver value quickly. Like they are not on the yearly release cycle either. Like they're doing dot releases throughout the year to try and get functionality out as quickly as they can. I mean, at the same time, like remember that Aspire is not itself an application model. Aspire is dev tooling and patterns. I mean, there are APIs that come with Aspire, and there's functionality there, but it's really accruing value to generally your ASP.NET Core applications. So what it is also a little bit different. Like it's in some sense, like if you think of like our SDK releases, like .NET SDK releases actually do come out in more intervals throughout the year. It's the runtime that actually snaps to that yearly release cadence. Every time you get a new Visual Studio release, for example, there's a .NET SDK update that comes, and that comes with new tooling and improvements for your development process. Aspire's kind of like that, both in its release cadence and also in the flavor of functionality that you're getting out of it. So it's a speedboat vehicle right now. I mean, as it matures, I wouldn't be surprised if that adjusts as things generally adjust as technologies get more further along in their maturity cycle. But we'll see how it goes. They're taking it one release at a time.
One of the biggest points since the beginning was that Blazor wasn't something that Microsoft invented internally and used internally to expose externally, in the same way that React became what it is, and in many ways Angular as well. Was there, do you really think, a problem to be solved with Blazor when it came out? I don't know if I said Aspire before, I mean Blazor. And do you think that it's fair criticism that maybe the reason why React actually took off is because Facebook is using it and was using it since its inception?
There definitely was a problem that Blazor was targeted to solve. It wasn't the problem of like, oh, Microsoft needs a new web UI framework for building, site X or web application Y. The problem that Blazor was intended to solve was just the cost and the additional burden of having to bridge multiple developer ecosystems when you're trying to build a web application. .NET has always been very strong server side. Like we have excellent runtime, super fast, super performant, highly tuned for running in your server environments, and also we have pretty good client story as well when it comes to native client. Like think Windows desktop applications. We've been doing that with .NET for forever. Where we didn't have any story is, well, what if I want to run something actually on the web platform, like in a browser? Well, there wasn't any way to do that for years and years and years. Like JavaScript is the native language of the web platform. So we played around with ASP.NET and ASP.NET Core, shipping various bits of JavaScript stuff, jQuery back in the day, Knockout.js, Steve Sanderson's project that I think was in our templates for a while, and trying to just keep up with whatever the latest hotness was and putting that in our templates and saying, well, you could use this because there's no .NET option for what you would do on the client for web. When WebAssembly came into being, and other modern web tech like WebSockets, that enabled this opportunity to allow you to build your web applications full stack using a C# and .NET model. And I know some people say, well, you could do that with JavaScript. You could take your JavaScript to the server, and I think that's fair. I think it's very analogous actually to the situation that the same type of problem that we were trying to solve with Blazor. If you're a JavaScript dev and you know JavaScript and you're writing code that runs in a browser, it's very appealing to say, oh, I can use JavaScript also to write my server pieces. I mean, is that going to be the most optimal thing to do on the server? In many cases, no. Like it'll maybe be slower, and maybe the development experience might not be scale up as well as other technologies on the server stack. But man, if it's good enough, it saves you ton of time and ton of like ramp up. Like I know folks like you and we have lots of people like this on our team are polyglot devs like can absorb multiple developer ecosystems like almost for breakfast, right? Like today I'm going to go learn Go, or today or tomorrow I'm going to learn Rust. But I think there is a real heavy actually expense for many developers to actually ramp up on a new language, on a new developer ecosystem, and particularly if it's beyond just like simple. Just I can do some basic stuff with the language, like being really proficient and deep in a stack. Like I can write a little JavaScript, but I would not consider myself like a great JavaScript dev. Like I don't know the latest, JavaScript toolchain, JavaScript frameworks, best practices, performance. All these concerns take time to ramp up. Years for many developers. If you can shortcut that, if you can take the skill set that you already have, the tool belt you're already familiar with, and use that to build your entire web application, for a lot of people that saves them a lot of time, a lot of money, a lot of resources. I know one of the things that you raised in that video was, is Blazor for large organizations, or is it for small organizations? I think this was in the original video, right? When you
Yeah.
were, a younger self, and
Yeah.
that was an interesting discussion. Like, I think it's not so much about the size of the organization. It's more about the team and what resources that team has. Blazor really adds value and solves problems when you need to do more with less. Like I can't afford on my team to go hire a separate front end JavaScript development team. I don't have that resources. I don't have that money. I've got .NET devs. I want to use .NET for my servers. So can I just use that also on the front end and be able to use my existing resources to build that app? When you have teams like that are in that situation, Blazor really seems to resonate. A lot of the startups, like smaller companies, actually find a lot of value in Blazor by doing that. If you look at a lot of our published customer stories on the .NET website for Blazor, a lot of them are these sort of smaller startup companies that are in that mode. And even at Microsoft, the teams that often end up using Blazor are also in a similar boat. They're not like Office, or Dynamics, where they've got these huge orgs and they can spin up a giant JavaScript development team to build out their front ends. They tend to be smaller groups that have some specific need, and their org doesn't have the JavaScript resources set up, and so they just build it all on Blazor, and they love it. They're able to do more quickly. So that's the problem that I feel Blazor is trying to solve is how can I build my web app with the toolchain that I know and do it faster, do it with less resources.
It seems that Microsoft's obsession to a degree is that .NET needs to be able to do everything that everything else is doing. It needs to do ML, it needs to do mobile, it needs to do now Blazor within reactive applications, it needs to do everything. I personally believe that if you're trying to be a generalist, you can't be perfect at anything. Is Microsoft okay with that? Because and to be quite frank, I think the only things that Microsoft is perfect at is the API-based web stack. I think that, having seen tons of other things, is unmatched. You see stories time and time again, even in other ecosystems with React Native, by the way, when you could do like mobile apps with React Native. The moment your company scales, you actually need that fine-tuned control that the native application can give you. So eventually you graduate to something better. The API stuff doesn't have anything better to graduate to. I think in many ways Maui and Blazor do, as well as ML.NET. What do you think about this narrative?
I think it's definitely fair that there are parts of the .NET stack that are more I don't know what's the right word, have more strengths than others. I think that's fair. I still think for the generalist argument, I totally buy. I mean, it's true that if you try to do too much and if you're not able to invest enough in each area, then things will suffer. And we gotta have a whole debate whether or not that's happened with the .NET platform. At the same time, I think there is also tons of value if you can be generalist and do things very, very well. And that's why we've tried for a breadth approach with .NET. There are definitely areas of the .NET platform that we invest in. We have more. What's the right word? We a lot more attention, I guess, than
Yeah,
others. Like we are
legal,
a cloud.
legal is calling. They want you to be careful with your words.
We love all of our .NET developers, but we are a business, and our business is primarily a cloud-based business. So the closer we get to the server, the more the managers and the people who are counting the pennies care about what's happening. So server obviously is very close to our cloud, and so there's a lot of effort and a lot of emphasis that gets put on, like, when we need the .NET server-side story to be amazing, and it's got to be fast and good, and we want people to use it and help people take advantage of our cloud offerings. And that's that. I mean, we're a company. That's part of what we do. But everything, the other technologies, like as you move towards client, like those accrue to that value proposition as well. Like if you are building your client with .NET, well, what are you more likely to do then on the server? You're probably more likely to do that with .NET as well, and that then you're probably more likely then to use look at Microsoft as an opportunity for your cloud offering. I mean, .NET runs in any cloud. You can use .NET wherever you'd like. But we try to make sure that using .NET to build your client application with your server application in Azure and in our cloud offerings is going to be really, really great. So that I think that kind of affects how we invest across the platform. And yeah, I mean, have we stretched ourselves on that? I mean, in some cases, maybe. I don't know. I think we're like with Maui, there was a lot of emphasis on Maui in this .NET Conf, and I think part of the reasons for that was that we're now partnering with some key players in the community to help us make Maui even more compelling offering. Like we have the partnership now with Sync Fusion to help us improve the Maui platform and get more built-in components that you can just use for free in Maui. So we invest in all the different parts, and I think they're all compelling in their own ways. I wouldn't say that each offering is going to be the perfect offering for every scenario, and that I think is the key distinction. Like even Blazor, would I say Blazor is the perfect offering for every web app that you ever would want to build? No, like absolutely not. There are types of web apps that Blazor is fantastic for, and there are other types of web apps where we should probably have a conversation. Say, well, that might not be the best scenario for Blazor, and we could talk about like what those trade-offs are. But I think a lot of the technologies in .NET are kind of like that. Like they accrue value together as a platform. Some of them are, yeah, they're not going to be the most optimal solution for that particular scenario, but there are absolutely scenarios where that using that .NET offering for that scenario is the right thing to do. Like it's the cheapest thing, it's the most productive thing, it has the most synergies with the rest of the stack that it accrues value together. I don't know if that makes sense.
Yeah, no, it makes perfect sense. I want to touch on the spreading yourselves too thin and on the we need to make money points for different reasons. But when I was interviewing for Microsoft back in 2018 or something, or 17, I was interviewing with the Cosmos DB team at the time, and there was a job opening. And then I think for that quarter, the Cosmos DB team didn't make money, and they said, "Oh, we're not hiring anymore, and we're moving some people internally." And that gave me sort of an insight of how resources are allocated differently based on revenue. Now, this might have changed, but even last year, if I'm not correct, or like 18 months ago, I knew people from Maui who were moved to Azure and then moved back to Maui because, again, quarter to quarter, money-related things. Why do I say all this? Well, it's on the spreading yourself too thin thing, but also how many people from Microsoft are working on Blazor, like, actively? By actively, I mean 35 hours a week.
Yeah, like I got that question quite a bit, and I think in general, I think people will find that the size of the various .NET teams is. I think people have this envision sometimes that there are hundreds of people working on every single technology in .NET, and it is much more targeted in the resourcing than you might sometimes expect. Even for all of ASP.NET Core is not actually that.
Yeah, and I know by the way, because I speak a lot, but I want people to understand like what's happening.
Yeah. So for Blazor itself, and this is the component model, like the Blazor framework piece of the stack. It's about, I think there's now 6 individual devs that work on that are part of the Blazor team. There's a dev lead, and I manage it on the PM side. And then there are the thing where it makes it a little squishy on how to count it is like the Blazor then builds on a whole bunch of other stuff that is then owned by other teams. So like Blazor server is built on top of SignalR, and there's a separate team that handles SignalR. It's like a couple devs that work on the SignalR part of the stack. There's the WebAssembly parts of the stack as well from the runtime. The debugging support for Blazor WebAssembly gets owned by the .NET debugging team. So there's a dev over there. So depending on how you count it, there's more devs that get thrown into the stack. But the actual framework itself, I think, is 6 engineers. Yeah. Plus, then of course all the help and support that we get from our community. Like .NET is an open source project, and we have contributors that help us out with the implementation. We'd love to have more. So if your organization is interested in contributing more to .NET in any part, whether it's Blazor, ASMIC, or like please reach out to us. But yeah, it's a fairly tight squad. Like it's not a lot of people.
Yeah. Which is impressive, by the way, for the scale of the product they've built. Like it's insane.
I should also mention that like Steve Sanderson is the grandfather of Blazor, right? Steve is also architect on the Blazor project, so I guess you would add him in as well as an additional one. He's not in that original 6 devs. Sorry, Steve, didn't mean to forget you.
It's okay, Steve.
I think people take you for granted.
Yeah, I can take this many ways, but I want to just go a bit back into, because you mentioned clients, right? People are asking who is using Blazor. Like, give me I can point to 1 billion companies using React, Angular, Vue, Next, whatever. Who the hell is using Blazor that people know? And I know you've demoed like what's the lawyer learning app that can play yeah. And okay, but because the reason why I say this is because I was working at ASOS in 2017, which is a clothing brand here in the UK, and we were one of the biggest, if not one of the 2 biggest users of Cosmos DB. I was heavily involved at the time, and the other one was Jet2. I think it's Jet2, or was it Jet or Walmart? I think Walmart. Massive. Sorry.
Did those 2 companies? I can't remember if they were.
I think I can't exactly remember. I think it was Walmart, but Jet was somewhere in the name. I can't remember why. In any case, massive companies, and the Cosmos DB people were just like, yeah, look there, we can do like 1 billion. They're not Italian. Sorry, I'm doing the accent. They were doing like 1 billion baskets for our clothes and so on. So look what Cosmos DB can do. Who you can point to and say that's what Blazor can do?
So we do publish Blazor customer stories. Like you can go to the .NET customers page, and I felt bad about this because I think you went looking through the Blazor homepage.
Yes.
It's like, where are the customers?
Put it there. Just put it there. I don't want to go to the blog.
I immediately went to GitHub to our like website page. It's like, please add a link to the Blazor customer stories from the homepage. That was a miss on our part. I apologize for that. But there is a .NET customers page which has all the customer stories across the stack. Maui and Blazor, ASMIC Core, and so forth. And there is a set of Blazor customer stories there. Like GE is there they use Blazor for was it the Flight Pulse application? It's like an application that's makes real-time data about the flights available to the pilots. The actual Flight Pulse client app, I think, is like a native mobile application. But the back-end system that manages what data those pilots sees, that's all done with Blazor. There are various like startups on there, like the Postage, I think, is the name of the company. It's actually a company that handles end of life concerns for like people. Like if you're worried about how can I transition important information and documents to my surviving generations, that's a company that handles those types of concerns. They built their offering in Blazor. You mentioned Aspen Publishing. We showed that at .NET Conf. There's a bunch that are there. One that's fun recently actually is, and I don't know if I hesitate a little bit to say this, but Coca-Cola used Blazor as part of their Create Real Magic application, which is this like AI-powered Santa Claus.
Yeah.
Where you go and talk to Santa, and he asks you some questions about like your Christmas memories, and then we'll create you a custom snow globe based on what you tell him.
Yeah.
And that app is done with Blazor. You can go check it out and look at its look at it in the dev tools. So yeah, there are big companies absolutely that are using Blazor. You tend to see it though the line of business side, like on
Mm.
the Coca-Cola example is almost more of the exceptional case. The on the Many of these companies are using Blazor behind the scenes for line of business applications, infrastructure, administrative portals, that type of stuff, which is very similar to how Microsoft uses Blazor. Like we use Blazor internally for a bunch of very business critical applications, but they tend to be for line of business things that don't demo particularly well. Like
Yeah.
the Bing team uses it for its experimental platform for how they manage like which features they're flighting onto the site and testing. That's all built with Blazor. The Xbox team uses Blazor for managing a bunch of their testing infrastructure. I think our field actually uses Blazor for their like compensation management portal, which is obviously not something that we're going to put on the
Yeah.
the,
No, go
the
on.
public web.
Go on.
What's the other one? Oh, yeah, our core identity team uses Blazor for a lot of the management of our employee identities. That's done with Blazor as well. But that where internally at Microsoft, where we currently don't use Blazor very much, is like the big public facing like products, like Microsoft 365, like the
Yeah.
Office web apps. Those don't use Blazor. Those are based on React, and a lot
Yeah.
of the other big
Teams,
property names
teams
from
as well.
Microsoft are similar. Teams is built on
Yeah.
React, and some of that is historical in reasons. Like Blazor just didn't exist when a lot of those products were being built. They needed as like Office was making its journey to the web, they needed something. I think initially they were using like a C# to JavaScript transpiler. I think it was Script Sharp is the name of the technology. Maybe you've heard of
It
it.
rings a bell. Yeah.
Yeah, this is old stuff, and they tried that for a while because they were a .NET shop. Like all the
Yeah.
backend systems were built with .NET. But I think that wasn't really something that wasn't supported by like the .NET team. It was a kind of a separate project, and they eventually decided, no, we need something a little bit more industry strength for our needs. This is Office, and they ended up going React, and that definitely did create some momentum inside of Microsoft. Like once I have a big organization like Office that's building on React and building out the engineering infrastructure around that and establishing patterns about what works well and how this can be done. Though there's a lot of value in picking up those investments from other teams. So a lot of teams kind of piggyback on the React investments that have been done by other big products. So there's some inertia there that also like Blazor deals with internally at Microsoft. But for smaller teams that don't have that type of organizational structure, they absolutely do use Blazor, and we have several thousand developers inside of Microsoft that are working with Blazor every month.
Outside of Aspire, what's the most high profile thing Microsoft is using Blazor on externally, so public facing?
I know I talked to the Intune team, and they said that they have a piece of their application that is user facing that is
Okay.
built with Blazor. I don't think it was very much though. Like it was
Yeah.
I certainly wouldn't say like, oh yeah, Intune is built on.
Yeah.
It's like some small part of the broader offering. Part of the .NET website is built on Blazor, but that's not really product offering. That's just us, using our own tech.
Yeah.
The Aspire dashboard going public on ACA is the most recent thing that I can think of as well. So yeah, for public facing Blazor usage of Microsoft, very little. Like it's not used very much in that regard, and part of that is also the technology fit. Like Blazor works really well for internal line of business, things where you're not trying to hit the scale of millions of concurrent users and you need to target like 75% or more of all the world's devices. Like, think Office, they need to be able to run on anything, like any device that you can throw at it, they need to be able to be there. And that puts certain constraints on what you do as a web platform. You need to then really optimize, like for products that really need to be fully optimized on the web platform in terms of download size and runtime performance. You probably should use JavaScript. And there's that when we talk about what you should do for your front end with ASP.NET Core. we try to position things that way. Like, yeah, there's Blazor, and we recommend Blazor. If you can use it, if it meets your scenarios, you should use it. But front end, there are tons of ASP.NET Core developers that use front end JavaScript with their .NET backends, and there are lots of good reasons to do that. One of them being that if you really need a fully optimized solution for download size, runtime performance, then you should probably do JavaScript. Blazor is going to be a hard sell if you need to hit 75% of all devices on the planet, just because it has a little overhead, right? It's not intended to be the fully optimized thing. It's tended to be the productive and easy to use, build fast thing. It's very similar, analogous, I think, to like when to use Node on the server. Like, is Node going to be the fastest thing on your server stack? Are you going to get the best COGS, cost of operations on your server with Node? No, but if you're already doing JavaScript and you have a JavaScript team, it's probably the most cost-effective thing in terms of developing your app.
It's also interesting because that's on the server. So the server, as long as you make a stateless application and you slap it behind a load balancer, it's going to be more expensive to run, but it will scale, right? Fundamentally. You can't really do that with Blazor. Like, yeah, you can scale the backend and singular R in Azure and all that, but the front end stuff doesn't scale like the server. So
it will hit a threshold where the user experience here is no longer meeting my requirements. Like if you need your app to load in X number of milliseconds on any kind of device, even to run code in the browser on the client in Blazor, you have to bring down the .NET WebAssembly runtime. There's like a megabyte of overhead in download size just to be able to have that pleasure. For some apps, that's totally fine. They're like, I don't care. Like I've got all this data that I'm going to be downloading anyway. I'm doing a type of application where someone's sitting in a desktop machine and they're going to be using the app all day. They're going to load it once and never load it again. You download that .NET runtime, cache it, and then you're good to go. And that works great. But if you're doing like a consumer-facing thing where that like download and load time delay will actually affect your business, then Blazor's probably not going to be the best option there. Definitely a concern. But for many apps, I think you'd be surprised at how many apps it does work fine. Like even the Blazor server model, where it's a stateful programming model that's leveraging your server resources to even run the user interface. It's much heavier on the server in that regard than using front-end JavaScript, certainly. When we did early tests, load tests with Blazor server, we found that you could take like a reasonably sized VM, like not a beast, like just a normal VM on Azure, and pretty easily handle like 20,000 concurrent users on a single VM. And a lot of apps out there aren't even close to that level of scale. Like many customers I talk to are like, I'm gonna have a few hundred concurrent users or a few thousand concurrent users. Even if you get into the tens of thousands, using the Blazor server model will actually work just fine. If you're doing like a large scale software as a service thing, like you're gonna have hundreds of thousands of concurrent users and your business model is based on what your cost structure on the server is going to be, then don't use the server model for that thing.
And it's not just that. It's in many ways it's latency as well, because you have to scale your application to so many different regions to have a load, because it's that interaction with the server every time. I think many people don't understand. Yeah, this will work if you do a demo and you deploy in like EU North and you're based in Europe, and you're not going to notice anything. But the Australia person or the America person, they're going to have a bad time. Even a button hover needs to have that hop. The way I understand it, right?
Latency is absolutely concerned.
Yeah. So you have to scale there and there.
Yep. You need to we want to position your servers close to wherever your end users are going to be with a Blazor server style application. And so if you have in general, if you have a UI pattern that requires low latency, like think like a drawing app, right? Where you need to as I move the mouse, I need the pixels to draw pretty fast. Using the server-side rendering capabilities is probably, again, not what you'd want to do. But for people doing like forms over data and those types of applications, it's fine. And people it's actually interesting to look at what the distribution of our Blazor users is. Like, how many people use the WebAssembly stuff versus the server stuff? And the service, it's pretty close. It's actually not skewed super strong one way or the other. But the Blazor server and the server-side rendering capabilities of Blazor are definitely the more popular ones.
Yeah.
It's about 60-40-ish.
I would expect it. Do you see any growth in one over the other or any decrease in usage in one over the other?
They're both growing,
Yeah.
and we are for .NET 10. The current thinking for like early planning in .NET 10 is that we're gonna do some pretty significant investments in the server side. The like right one of the problems you have with Blazor Server is the how do you manage the state? Like yeah, right now the state for your Blazor server app is just held in memory. The user connects to the website. That we set up this thing called a circuit, which manages all the state for them. And then if that state gets lost for whatever reason, well, there's nothing in Blazor that will try to persist it and rehydrate it again, so that the user gets back to whatever they're doing. Like imagine you have like a multi-stage form or whatever,
Yeah.
and they're like halfway through, and then someone deploys something to the server that causes it to restart. Well, you can get that user to reconnect with .NET 9. We improved the reconnection experience in the .NET 9 release, but nothing will hold on to whatever they were doing in those forms and rehydrate it again. They'll be back at the beginning unless you did something in your app to save that state
Yeah.
and reload it. In 10, we want to try and create a model, like a declarative state handling model that will help you persist things and manage that problem better.
How
So
would
we'll
that
be investing more in the server.
how would that work? Sorry to interrupt. How would that work? Because the reason why I discovered this is I was playing with Blazor through Aspire, Blazor server. And I do this thing. Many people, I think, don't know this, but on Aspire, you can do .with replicas and put a number in how many replicas of your application you want to have, whatever you're running. So if you're running a web browser, you can say web API dot this project dot with replicas 5, and you're going to get 5 instances of the application. It gives you a single URL, but then it's rerouted to one of the 5 instances. I don't know if that's news to you. I haven't seen it documented anywhere. I just randomly found it. And
I
if
didn't know that either.
and
Yeah,
if
right.
one of them is killed, it's going to be rerouted to an alive one, or if you restart it. So I was doing that, and then I killed one, and my state was gone. And I'm like, how do I just fix this?
Need That's interesting because like you do with Blazor server apps, you generally first of all need session affinity.
Yeah.
And in this case, you're actually killing the circuit
Yeah.
entirely. But if you were just like to reconnect, you want to make sure you're going back to the same server instance so
Exactly.
that you get back to a state. If you lost the state, like you killed it and it's gone, and then you reconnect to a new server instance, like it will be the app will detect like, oh, that's not the same circuit I was at before. And in .NET 8 and earlier, it would just fail actually. Like the user interface would just sit there and say, sorry, like feel free to refresh the browser if you'd like. In 9, we will at least refresh the browser, establish a new circuit again, and get you started from scratch. To persist the state, in your application code today, you have to write stuff that says like, hey, when the circuit is starting up, like go check to see if I have any state that I should load for this, and during the application flow, you need to decide, are there like persistence points that you want to add to like save the state so that you can reload
like
it later.
Redis or anything.
You put in Redis, you could try to save it on the client, like you could put it in local storage, like those. There's various places where you could put the state. Steve Sanderson wrote a circuit persister sample a while back that's available on his GitHub account that you can go look at as one approach for how you might do this. But it's very manual today. Like the Blazor doesn't help you with any of this problem. It becomes a problem for the app developer to go solve. In 10, we're hoping to create a model around this problem that makes it much easier to manage.
Okay, I have a few questions that go on their own path and sort of wrap this up. The first one is, if you were starting a business today that is planning to have millions of users, potentially tens of thousands of concurrent users, what's the stack you're using on the back and the front end? And you can include database if you want, but mostly.
Well, I mean, of course, I'm going to use .NET on the back end. Like, there's no question on that one. Whether I end up using a front-end JavaScript framework or Blazor will depend on the nature of the app and the types of clients that I'm trying to target. If I'm trying to target consumer web and I want to go as broad as I possibly can, I'm going to probably push on the JavaScript front and go with the JavaScript stack. Doing like a B2B type of thing where I feel confident about the environment and the devices that are going to consume the application, I generally recommend starting with Blazor like from server and then moving towards the client as you need to. I would start with Blazor static server-side rendering for anything that really doesn't require interactivity. You're just going to render a page. It's static. There's no reason to have anything happening with WebSockets or WebAssembly. Where I then need interactivity, I'm going to add in interactive server rendering to have islands of interactions to enable that. And for certainly at the beginning stages of my startup, I probably would just do that anyway because I know I'm not going to have very many users at the start, and it'll enable me to move fast and get functionality out the door as quickly as I can. And as the load becomes heavier, I would start to flip those things to push them to the client, like move them down to WebAssembly, have them use the user's CPU and memory and resources. There's also the auto render mode, like which I know we talked a lot about in .NET 8, which is this thing where you can kind of do a mixture of both, right? You start with the interactive server rendering with the WebSocket connection if you don't have the .NET WebAssembly runtime downloaded and cached. And then once it gets downloaded and cached in the background, and then you can flip to use it once it's available for like a future render of that component. I would only move to that if I'm like in a position where I need to move stuff to the client, but I need the load time performance of my application to be faster. Like I'm sensitive to the load time performance, and I would try to leverage that. But that is honestly it's the most complicated of the Blazor setup. So that's my kind of last resort. I'm going to have to think about both the concerns of Blazor Server and Blazor WebAssembly when I'm using that mode. So I would only go to that if I really needed to optimize more. And then once you're in that boat, you also might want to start thinking about, well, if I'm so load time performance sensitive, maybe I should be doing JavaScript just so I can really, shake things down and get it really small. So that's how I would think about it.
If you were to choose, obviously something outside of Blazor, what would you pick?
I don't know. What's the new hotness these days?
No, Dan. I want Dan's choice.
Like I said, I am not a great JavaScript developer. I would probably. I don't know, what would be some?
And by the way, TypeScript is cool, by the way, so you can work with TypeScript.
Oh, I would definitely use strong typing because I've been doing strong type development my entire life. I would take advantage of TypeScript. Around it,
and
it would be very tempting to try out some of the fancy new things like Svelte and SvelteKit.
I'm the same. I see Svelte, I see Vue, I'm like, just React is like you have everything here and more. The only hurdle is you have to learn a language which is not as good as C#, but it's not that different, at least in my opinion. Like you said, I'm polyglot. I keep learning languages to see what C# is ripping off from other languages, basically. So yeah, but on the sorry.
I had heard that the Angular release, like Angular 19, actually was very compelling. The Angular sort of having a resurgence type of mode. Is that have you found that as well?
I haven't researched it enough, but everything seems to be having a resurgence. And the thing is, they tend to be reinventing something that Microsoft did years ago with a different name, and people hate it because it's Microsoft. You see it all the time.
Have you played around? How much have you played around with the like server-side rendering capabilities in like do you use? We said React, but React is a pretty thin thing
you can go anywhere.
What would Nick say for like? Well, yeah, React that's nice thing, but you also are going to need like. Would you use like server components? Would you look at Next?
I would look at Next. Next.js is I
think with a lot of the
getting into this. Sorry to interrupt. Getting into this, especially if you are not necessarily someone who wants to be in the bleeding edge and you pick up things easily, just see where the market is going and start with that. Get familiar with it. See what the problems are in this ecosystem, and I can guarantee you that there's something else that was created yesterday that's trying to fix it. If you want to use that, do. But what I found is eventually, I think like web development is eventually consistent, meaning eventually everyone has the same features. It's just a different flavor of it. And it's happening with Blazor as well, by the way. It's like there's a lot of osmosis happening. But there was a point you made when we mentioned like picking technologies and mentioning React, which is you'd have a better time hiring as well. Like in London, I don't know how it is in the US, but in London, if you search for Blazor on Indeed, which is like an aggregator of jobs, you find 18 jobs. For React, you find like thousands. It's crazy. And I think it goes back to the thing of you probably don't get hired as a Blazor developer. You get hired as an MVC developer, as a .NET developer in general, and the company just happens to have something small internally that they use Blazor for, and then that's how you use Blazor.
That concerns me. I mean, Blazor is certainly earlier in its cycle than a lot of and the JavaScript ecosystem also in general, to be fair, is like it's the largest development ecosystem that's out there, and so there's a lot of people doing front-end JavaScript, learning JavaScript early. JavaScript is kind of unfair because they got this sort of monopoly on the browser, which is the most breadth platform available as well. So they do have that, but there's still plenty of .NET developers out there and plenty of .NET jobs. I think it's just I do understand the concern about like where should I spend my time and learning to pick the career that I want to do, and I would absolutely look at where the market trends are, what technologies are looking like they're going to have a good future, and everyone needs to plan for the longevity of their career. .NET has been around for many decades, and I expect will continue to be around for many decades. So I think you can feel good about it as an investment, but it's not the only option. There are certainly others.
So what is next for Blazor?
.NET 10. Well, we talked a little bit about that.
Yeah.
So we're definitely looking at how can we improve interactive server rendering? How can we help with state persistence? That will be a big part of what we do, and that will, I think, accrue to a number of different problems, like how you flow state from the server to the client when you need to do that. Today we have like APIs around persisting component state during pre-rendering. Like often in Blazor, you'll pre-render your components from the server, which is effectively a static server-side rendering, and then that gets HTML down to the browser as quickly as you can. You get pixels on the screen, but then we set up whatever interactivity model you picked, whether that's the Blazor server, WebSocket connection-based thing, or the WebAssembly-based thing. And often you want to flow the state from the server to the client as part of doing that. You don't want to have to get the data again when you set things up for interactivity. And we have APIs today that'll help you do that, but they're fairly imperative in nature. So like the work that we do for state persistence for Blazor server in general, I think will also simplify how you flow state around with like a more declarative style model. So we'll be looking in that space. I think we'll also look at improvements to just the static server-side rendering support in general. We shipped that for first version with .NET 8. A lot of the concerns with that model are around like, well, how do you deal with forms and posting and binding the data, all the model binding stuff that if you've been doing MVC and Razor pages, like you're probably very, very familiar with. We had to add all that stuff to Blazor so you could do those things too. And I think there's still some gaps there that we want to address, like binding to collections and things like that are still a little rough around the edges in Blazor server-side rendering. So there's some gaps in the server-side rendering space that we'll want to deal with. There's some performance improvements that we want to continue. Like we did a bunch of work around static assets in .NET 9. Like during build and publish time, we can identify all the static assets that are part of your ASP.NET Core app. It's not even really a Blazor specific concern. Like if you have JavaScript files, CSS files, you can identify those and then optimize them as part of the build. Like fingerprint them with unique hashes based off of their content. Pre-compress them so that they're smaller, and then do very aggressive caching of those files once they're being served. I think we'll want to continue some of that work in .NET 10 to specifically optimize some like how Blazor apps load, like doing some preloading tricks where we instead of letting things sort of cascade through a series of requests and downloads, like aggressively saying up front, like, hey, I know I'm going to eventually need, if I'm loading Blazor web.js, I know I'm going to need .NET.js, so let's go ahead and get that going as well and sort of collapse the waterfall of downloads. So that'll be a nice load time improvement. On the WebAssembly side, we want to have some more tooling around how you do diagnostics. Like if you want to do memory profiling and those types of things for your WebAssembly applications, we don't have a great tool chain right now for doing that. So we're definitely investigating what we can do there. I think one of the big open questions is multi-threading. I know Blazor community is going to be looking at that one closely. Multi-threading is a feature that we've wanted to do for years. I think at this point, like at least three releases. I think we've tried and had to push it out. Um, we're gonna try again in 10. It's not committed yet. The part of the I guess I should say I missed actually the top priority that we have to deal with in 10, which is the broader security push
Yeah.
at Microsoft, the Secure Future Initiative.
Yeah.
All across the company, teams are looking at how can we make sure that our infrastructure
Yeah.
and our how we do things and how the features that we ship to our customers are as secure as possible. So that will also be a major thrust in .NET 10, doing the working on security. Some of that will result, I think, in some nice security features for end users. Improvements to authentication. We're talking about like supporting passkey and WebAuthn in the identity stack that we ship for ASMIC Core. Surfacing those authentication options in the open API specs that we now support and generating. So there'll be a big security push that we'll have to deal with in 10. So whether multi-threading fits in, we're still discussing. There are some tricky problems with multi-threading. I know people are probably
Yeah.
rolling their eyes and saying, "Dan, you keep saying you're going to do this, but we don't get it out the door." We'll see. We'll see how far we get.
Yeah. It's like the discriminated unions of
I know.
Blazor. Let's see who does it
Yeah.
first. Last question. Favorite language outside or programming language outside of the Microsoft languages?
Language. Um, Probably Python. Like, I don't nothing exciting. Like I am not like
Hey,
exotic.
hey,
You know, I
you'd be in the top demographic on GitHub according to the new
I know
state of
it's kind of
developers.
boring. If I wanted to get something done quick and dirty,
Yeah.
Python seems to be the great thing. And also because of its affinity to the AI space right now, like I find the AI technologies really cool and
Yeah.
really compelling. And so being able to play in that space would be really fun. So yeah, I probably would look at Python. Um, just because it's fun to play around. And my kid, a lot of education. I think Python has really found its place in teaching
Yeah.
kids how to code. Both of my kids took they took my older son took a C# course in high school, but they started out like learning coding concepts in
Yeah.
Python. So it's fun also to be able to talk to the younger generation about just basic coding by speaking their language that they're using. So,
I
I mean,
see.
I know there's Go and Rust and Kotlin. They're
Yeah,
all
but
interesting to me, but yeah.
I'm more of a Kotlin person myself. It just feels like because I was doing Java before Kotlin came out, and then I did C# and I came back to Java, and I'm like, wow, they fixed Java by making it C#. Basically, it's it's brilliant. It's brilliant. Well,
No, they did a good job.
that is all I had for today. Thank you so much for joining me in this. Like, I hope I wasn't too annoying.
Not at all. These are great questions. Questions I'm sure that many people have, and so I'm happy to talk
uh,
about them. And
uh,
if you have these questions, feel free to come to us on
yeah,
GitHub as well. Like open these questions on GitHub discussions. You can meet us there or reach out to us on social media.
uh,
Yeah, you don't need to worry.
yeah,
Is what I hope the message here.
yeah. People think that Microsoft is just sitting in this ivory tower and they're not responding even like on which I think this was more challenging than what it usually is when you talk to other people. But the moment the video came out, Dan reached out and was like, okay, let's do something about this. Let's do it in the .NET channel. I'm like, no, I want the views. come over and let's do it here. And yeah, thank you so much for joining. I really appreciate it.
My
And
pleasure.
as always, keep coding.